Welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe, and tap the bell icon. The bank manager's smile vanished the moment Jeremiah placed the documents on the polished desk. You said, "You're here to buy what?" "A jet," Jeremiah said, voice steady. He folded his calloused hands, the kind of hands that told stories the eyes couldn't, and waited. The man blinked. Once, twice. "A private jet?" "That's right. Model Gay and Namli Manol, already inspected. I'm here to finalize the funding." Silence, not the awkward kind, but the heavy kind. The kind that said 1,000 unsaid things. The kind Jeremiah knew too well. The manager adjusted his cufflinks. His eyes flicked from Jeremiah's flannel shirt to the thick file on the desk. "Mr. Jacobson, with all due respect, you're a farmer, correct?" Jeremiah nodded. "That's where I started. But I also run a transport company and logistics across 3 states. I'm expanding into air cargo. It's all in the paperwork." The manager offered a tight-lipped smile. "You understand, of course, that this is highly unusual." Jeremiah didn't flinch. Unusual doesn't mean illegal. That landed like a slap. The manager's smile dropped completely. He stood up without a word and walked out of the room. Jeremiah watched him go. Jaw clenched. He'd felt it before. The shift in the air when someone decided you don't belong. Not because of numbers, credentials, or paperwork, but because of skin. He glanced around the upscale office. Brass nameplates framed Ivy League degrees. A plaque that read "Client Trust is our priority." Lies on polished wood. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Finally, the door opened again. But this time, the manager wasn't alone. 2 uniformed police officers stepped in behind him. "Mr. Jacobson," one said, a white man with a buzzcut and cold eyes. "We need to speak with you." Jeremiah stood slowly. "About what?" "You're being detained under suspicion of attempted fraud. The documents you submitted don't align with reported business activity." Jeremiah stared. "Excuse me." The second officer moved forward. "Hands behind your back." "You've got to be kidding." But before he could finish, they were on him. Jeremiah was slammed face first onto the manager's pristine desk. His arms yanked behind him, metal biting into skin. Pain shot through his shoulder, but worse than the pain was the humiliation, a deep burning ache in his chest as his worth was erased in front of a dozen watching eyes. Clients stared. Phones recorded. No one spoke. The manager didn't even look at him. He just turned and walked out, straightening his tie like he'd just cleaned a spill. 4 hours later, Jeremiah sat in a cold cell, the cement bench hard against his spine. His wrists were sore, his dignity bruised. No charges had been filed. No lawyer had arrived. He stared at the cracks in the wall, counting them, trying not to explode. He'd built everything from scratch, from a broken-down tractor on inherited land no one wanted, to a multi-million-dollar farming and logistics empire. He worked while others slept, risked while others saved, paid in full, in blood and sweat. And yet this, then a voice outside the bars. "You shouldn't be in here." Jeremiah looked up. A young woman stood there, slim, mid-20s, sharp, eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. Her name badge read, Malia Washington, Legal Aid Program. "I'm not your lawyer," she said quickly. "But I saw the video, the arrest, the stories all over Twitter. I pulled your records. You're clean." He raised an eyebrow. "So why am I still in a cage?" "Because someone doesn't want you free," she said, voice low. "And because most people don't question when a black man says he can buy a jet." He looked at her for a long moment. "You believe me." "I believe the paperwork, and I believe the way they handled this." It wasn't just about disbelief, it was intentional. Someone wanted to stop this deal. Jeremiah leaned closer to the bars. "Then we make it hurt when we win." Malia smiled. That night, the video hit 4.2 million views. #FarmerJetGate, #BlackOwned Air, #LetHimFly. News anchors debated the facts. Comment sections exploded. Some said Jeremiah was a symbol of rising black excellence. Others claimed it was staged. But by morning, Jeremiah wasn't just a farmer. He was a headline. He was the man who dared. Jeremiah sat motionless, phone still, pressed to his ear, long after the voicemail ended. "They're coming for the land next." The words looped in his mind like a snake curling tighter around his chest. It had taken him 17 years to reclaim. His family's farmland the same. 200 acres his grandfather once owned, before it was bought out by the county in a mysterious seizure. Land that had been in the Jacobson name since the late 1800s. That land was more than soil. It was legacy. It was pain. It was everything. And now, someone was threatening it. He rose slowly, walked to the window, and stared across the fields. Beyond his house, dawn hadn't broken yet, but the rows of soybeans glistened in the moonlight. The sight used to give him peace. Tonight, it just made him feel exposed. His phone buzzed again. "Malia, did you see it?" she asked the moment he picked up. "I heard it," he replied. A blocked number, distorted voice. They knew details about the jet deal no one should know. There was a pause. "You think it's connected to the arrest?" "I think," Jeremiah said. "This goes way beyond that bank." The next morning, things got stranger. He pulled into his office lot just after 7 a.m. and noticed the gate was wide open. That gate was never open. He parked, got out cautiously, and walked toward the storage barn where his tractors were housed. The steel latch hung broken, bolts scattered across the gravel. He stepped inside and stopped cold. All 5 tractors had been gutted, not stolen. Destroyed, seats ripped, engines smashed, GPS consoles yanked out like organs. Whoever had done it wasn't trying to steal anything. This was personal. This was punishment. Jeremiah stood in the middle of the barn, staring at the wreckage. Then he turned on his heel and walked out. "Whoever left that voicemail is already here," he said later, pacing the floor of Malia's small downtown office. She tapped her pen against her notepad. "Have you made enemies in business?" "Plenty," he said. "You don't build something this big, this fast, and this black, without stepping on a few toes. But enemies who'd sabotage your machines, leave anonymous threats." He stopped pacing. "This isn't just sabotage. This is warning. First the jet deal, now the farm. Whoever this is, they're scared of what I'm becoming." Malia studied him. "Jeremiah, do you think someone's trying to erase you?" That afternoon, Jeremiah drove out to visit a man he hadn't seen in years. Eldon Rhodes, an ex-sheriff, retired, white, 78 years old, and sharper than ever. He lived on the edge of the county in a trailer filled with dusty books and conspiracy theories. When Jeremiah told him about the voicemail, the arrest, and the tractor wreckage, Eldon leaned back in his chair and lit a cigarette. "You poked the bear, son," Eldon muttered. "What bear?" Eldon exhaled a stream of smoke. "Land in this county ain't just property. It's history. It's control. Every major landowner here has ties to old money and old sins. Your family, they never stood a chance back in the day. And now, you're messing with the air routes, too. Private jets, cargo lanes, that ain't just ambition. That's disruption." Jeremiah narrowed his eyes. "So what? Someone's trying to protect the status quo." Eldon stubbed out his cigarette. "More like someone's trying to make sure people like you never hold the reins." Jeremiah leaned in. "Who's behind it?" "Eldon." The old man hesitated. "There's a name I keep hearing in whispers. A trust. A quiet family fund that holds land titles all over the South under dummy names." "What name?" "White Hollow Reserve." That night, Jeremiah sat in his home office, digging. White Hollow Reserve wasn't a registered company, not openly, but using land transfer records, he found the name tied to dozens of properties, including 4 in his own county, properties that bordered his land. Then he noticed something chilling. One of the parcels, marked under White Hollow, had his grandfather's original land number, the one that had supposedly been condemned and taken by the state 40 years ago. But now it was listed under a private trust, quietly sold, quietly transferred. Jeremiah's stomach turned. They'd never lost the land legally they'd been stolen from, and the people who had done it were still here, still operating, and now, coming back for more. Jeremiah didn't sleep that night. The note from White Hollow Reserve sat on his kitchen table, like a lit fuse. "We gave your grandfather a chance to walk away. He didn't take it. Now it's your turn." He read it 30 times. It didn't just rattle him, it enraged him. His grandfather had died broke, working 2 jobs after losing the land. They said it was rezoned. They said it was condemned. They said it was legal. But none of it was true. And now, someone was threatening him the same way, trying to crush him into silence. Jeremiah wasn't wired like that. He didn't bow. He built. But even hammers can break. The next morning, he drove to County Records, a brick building with peeling paint and an office clerk, who looked like she hadn't blinked in 40 years. He handed over the property info. "Need everything on these parcels," he said. ownership history, transfer records, especially from the 1980s. She narrowed her eyes. Are you involved in litigation? Not yet, he said, but maybe soon. 10 minutes later, she returned with a dusty brown folder and placed it gently on the counter. Jeremiah opened it, and his blood ran cold. White Hollow Reserve had acquired 4 major properties in the county between 1982 and 1986, all during the same window when black farmers were being forced off their land in record numbers. Each purchase was signed by a different agent, but the signatures all looked similar. Same pen pressure, same writing style. A ghost trust, hiding behind fake names and shell buyers. But the real gut punch came on the final page. One of the signatories was the bank manager who had him arrested last week. Jeremiah stared at the name, Daniel J. Wells. He wasn't just some uptight banker with racial bias. He was part of the system that stole his family's land, and now was trying to take it again. Malia met him at a gas station just outside city limits. Her idea, in case they were being watched. This is bigger than we thought, she whispered, flipping through the folder. If this is real, if this trust has been laundering land for decades, they're not just laundering, Jeremiah cut in. They're targeting one by one families who couldn't fight back. Malia looked up. But you're not like the others. No, he said. I made it too far. Now I'm a threat. She stared at him a moment. Then we need to find someone who used to be on the inside. Someone who can talk. Jeremiah nodded slowly. I might know someone. That night, Jeremiah drove 3 hours into the hills. Gravel crackled under his tires as he pulled up to a small cabin tucked beneath a wall of pine trees. It had been almost 10 years since he'd seen Clayton Red Booker, a former land assessor turned whistleblower, who vanished after exposing corruption in Mississippi's rural zoning office. Red was barefoot, bearded, and already holding a shotgun when Jeremiah stepped out of the truck. Easy, Jeremiah said, hands raised. It's me. Red squinted. Then, slowly, he lowered the barrel. Damn boy. Thought you were dead? Not yet, Jeremiah said. But I need your help if I want to stay that way. Inside the cabin, under a flickering bulb, Jeremiah laid out the files. Red studied them silently, mouth tight, eyes narrowing. White Hollow, he muttered. Been years since I heard that name. So it's real, Jeremiah said. Red nodded slowly. More than real. It's a legacy system. Started as a fund for wealthy landowners who didn't want their names on anything. Old plantation families, southern bankers, even politicians. They'd buy land under the trust to protect it from taxes. Lawsuits, black ownership. Jeremiah clenched his fists. And my grandfather. Targeted, Red said flatly. Like many others. I saw his file once. He was flagged for potential influence. Too smart, too proud, wouldn't sell. He took a breath. They made sure he lost everything. Jeremiah stared into the flames of the cabin's wood stove. The pain in his chest wasn't just grief. It was something ancient, something passed down through blood and soil. Can you help me prove it? He asked quietly. Red nodded. But if we do this, they'll come after us both. Jeremiah stared at the blinking message on his wiped computer screen. Some roots grow too deep. Cut them, or be buried with them. The screen flickered once, then went black. His stomach twisted. This wasn't just sabotage anymore. This was war. He rushed to the closet, pulled out a small fireproof lockbox, and unlocked it. Inside were old flash drives, hard copies of land titles, a spare phone, his last offline backups. He prayed they hadn't gotten to them too. He inserted one of the drives into a laptop he hadn't used in over a year. It worked. Relief washed over him until the phone in his pocket buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. We know what you just plugged in. You really want to keep pushing this? His hands tightened around the phone. They were watching everything. Malia met him in the woods behind his farm. The same place he used to play as a child, chasing rabbits with his brothers. Now, he felt like the hunted dot. She brought printouts of the property transfers from Red's files. The proof was growing. Fraudulent signatures, dummy trusts, erased audit trails. They're scared, she said, flipping through the pages. That's why they're lashing out. You're close. Jeremiah sat on a fallen log, shoulders heavy. They wiped everything. Every contract, every license, every receipt I've ever filed digitally. If I didn't have these backups, I'd be a ghost. Then we go public, she said. You have the story, the proof, the momentum. People are watching. Jeremiah looked at her, eyes hollow. You think justice lives online? He asked. They don't want likes. They want my land. They want me gone. Her jaw tensed. Then we hit back harder. But just as they prepared to leak the evidence, a deeper betrayal arrived. That evening, Jeremiah pulled into his equipment yard and found a familiar pickup truck parked by the barn. Tobias, his cousin, his right hand for the past 8 years, trusted with everything from harvest schedules to payroll. Jeremiah stepped out of his truck. What are you doing here this late? Tobias looked nervous. I wanted to talk to you before you heard it from someone else. Jeremiah's instincts flared. Heard what? Tobias looked down. They offered me a deal last month, to walk away, to sign over my part of the Coendy land. They said it would help clear your debt, shut everything down cleanly. Jeremiah's blood froze. You what? I didn't do it, Tobias said quickly. Not at first, but then the jet thing happened, and the cops, and the tractors. I thought, maybe if I stepped away, it'd protect the rest of the family. You signed, Jeremiah said flatly. Tobias didn't answer. That was all the confirmation he needed. Jeremiah staggered backward, like he'd been punched. You gave them my bloodline, our legacy. I was trying to protect what I could, Tobias shouted. You don't know what they threatened me with. Jeremiah's voice dropped into a whisper. You're right, I don't, because they threatened me directly, and I never folded. He turned his back and walked away. Tobias didn't follow. The next morning, Jeremiah stood alone on the southern edge of his farm, where the fence divided his property from the land Tobias had just surrendered. A fresh survey stake had been driven into the soil. A white plastic flag fluttered from the top. Future Development Zone, White Hollow Properties. Jeremiah knelt and pulled the flag out of the ground, slowly, deliberately. Then he crushed the plastic in his fist and dropped it at his feet. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. He drove straight to Eldon Rhodes, the retired sheriff, and laid out the betrayal. Eldon listened quietly, then stood and reached behind a bookshelf. He pulled out an old manila folder, thick with typed reports and grainy, black and white photographs. This is from the 1985 investigation into land seizures, Eldon said. Never made it to court. Evidence disappeared. But I kept a copy. Jeremiah opened the file and his breath caught. One photo showed a much younger Daniel J. Wells, the banker who'd had him arrested, shaking hands with a man labeled WH Field Agent #4. Another document confirmed it. Daniel Wells had been involved in over a dozen black land reassignments. Another ghost. Another piece of the machine. Now you've got him, Eldon said. With these files, and what you got from Red, you can drag this whole operation into the light. Jeremiah closed the folder. Then I will. Jeremiah sat, in the dark, hands clasped, staring out his living room window. No lights, no sound, just the deep hum of Mississippi night and the weight of what the voice on the phone had promised. The next time we visit, it won't be your equipment we destroy, it'll be your home. He should have been afraid, but he wasn't. He was angry. They had taken his grandfather's land, tried to take his dignity, humiliated him in a bank lobby, cuffed him like a criminal for daring to dream above his station. They tried to erase his records, steal his legacy, turn his own family against him. Now they threatened his home, the one place that still felt safe. They didn't understand. This wasn't just about land anymore. It was about memory, blood, roots. And roots that grow deep are hard to rip out. By morning, he had a plan, the kind of plan that needed quiet allies, buried leverage, and a very loud stage. First, he drove to the county courthouse and filed an official injunction against any development near his farm. Using Red's files, Eldon's folder, and the original survey map from 1932, he proved the land surrounding his property was still under dispute. It wouldn't stop them forever, but it would slow them down, give him time to make his next move. Then, he called Malia. I want to go public, he said. But not just a blog post or a leak. I want the whole story, start to finish. You're sure? She asked. If I die in a fire, they'll call it an accident, he replied. I need the world to know before the flames even start. That night, Malia uploaded the first part of the expose to an independent news outlet she trusted, one that didn't bow to advertisers or hidden donors. The article hit hard. From farm to fraud, the hidden network behind America's black land loss. It featured names, dates, photos, and voices, including Red's sworn affidavit and a transcript from Eldon confirming White Hollow's existence. Within hours, it started trending. By the next morning, 3 more outlets had picked it up. Then came the interviews. Jeremiah agreed to one, just one, a live interview on an evening broadcast watched by millions. He wore his late grandfather's hat, sat straight-backed in a plain chair in front of his fields, and he told the truth about the jet, the arrest, the trust, the legacy they tried to bury. They told me I wasn't allowed to fly, Jeremiah said into the camera, not just literally, but figuratively. They want black success to be limited to survival, not ownership, not altitude. But I've never been afraid of heights. The anchor blinked back tears. The internet exploded, and White Hollow started to fracture. The next day, Tobias showed up again. This time, he wasn't defiant. He looked broken. "They're threatening me now," he said, standing on the porch. "They said, if I don't denounce you publicly, they'll come after my daughter's school records, her future." Jeremiah didn't answer right away. He remembered growing up with Tobias, catching crawfish in the ditch behind the barn, sharing cornbread and secrets. They had been like brothers, until fear drove a wedge between them. "I don't blame you for being scared," Jeremiah finally said, "but I'm done being scared for both of us." Tobias looked down, ashamed. "What do I do?" Jeremiah opened the door wider. "You stand with me, and we make sure your daughter never has to." Later that week, federal interest began stirring. An attorney from the Department of Justice reached out, requesting to review the files. There was talk of a civil rights investigation into rural land fraud, possibly the largest in decades. Jeremiah knew it wouldn't fix everything overnight, but it was a crack in the wall, and cracks can bring down whole buildings. The morning after the fire, Jeremiah stood on the scorched earth behind the shed. The ashes were still warm. The metal frame of the old mower inside had melted into the dirt. They hadn't burned down his house. Not yet. But this, it was a message. We're still here. And Jeremiah had a message of his own. So am I. That day, the Department of Justice confirmed that they were opening a federal investigation into White Hollow Reserve and its affiliates. The story had snowballed across the internet, into newsrooms, even onto Capitol Hill. Journalists began reaching out to former farmers, whose names had been buried in forgotten deeds and lost inheritances. Suddenly, Jeremiah wasn't the only one speaking up. The silence was breaking, and once truth starts to breathe, it's hard to suffocate again. But Jeremiah wasn't finished. One final step remained. It was time to confront the man who started this war in the present. The polished face of an old monster hiding behind a banker's tie. Daniel J. Wells. He walked into the same bank lobby where he'd been arrested just weeks earlier. This time, no one touched him. No cuffs, no suspicion. People recognized his face now, and not from mugshots. He asked to speak to Wells. The secretary stammered, trying to redirect him. "I'll wait," Jeremiah said, planting himself in a chair. 20 minutes passed. Finally, the door opened. Wells stood in the hallway, stone-faced. "He shouldn't be here," he said quietly. Jeremiah rose. "And you shouldn't be free. But here we are." They locked eyes for a long moment. Wells looked older than he had. Paler, like the fire of control was sputtering. Jeremiah took a step closer. "You tried to bury me with your ancestors' guilt. You humiliated me, destroyed my equipment, erased my files, and set fire to my land. But I'm still standing. And now, the world knows your name." Wells's jaw tightened. "You don't understand the systems you've provoked." "Oh, I understand them," Jeremiah said. "I just stopped being afraid of them." He turned to leave. As he stepped outside, he felt lighter. Not because the war was over, but because he had finally stopped carrying the fear of losing. Now, he was fighting to win. The following month was a whirlwind. Federal auditors began seizing documents. One White Hollow affiliate went dark. Files vanished. Offices emptied overnight. But not before Malia had secured evidence that proved land laundering had continued as recently as 6 months ago. In 5 different states, Jeremiah's lawsuit, joined by 8 other black farmers, officially landed in federal court. Even Red, the hidden whistleblower, agreed to testify. Justice was slow, but it had begun. As fall rolled in, Jeremiah stood in his southern field, watching his niece, Tobias's daughter, run through the tall grass, her hair catching the wind. Like a banner. Tobias stood beside him. They hadn't said much in the past few days, But the betrayal no longer hung between them like a wall. It had become a bridge. "I'm sorry," Tobias said again softly. Jeremiah nodded. "We're here, that's what matters." Tobias looked around. "You really think this land is safe now?" Jeremiah smiled. "Just a little. No land is ever fully safe, but it's ours, and now they know. We won't give it up quietly." 1 week later, Jeremiah received the final call he didn't expect, but deeply needed. It was from the National Aviation Equity Board, the jet deal that had triggered this whole storm. It had quietly resumed. After verifying his records and assets and reviewing the viral story, they were greenlighting the purchase. The same model, the same aircraft, paid for in full. "You still want it?" the rep asked. Jeremiah looked out his window, thought of the soil, the smoke, his grandfather. "Yes," he said, "but not just for me." And that's how, on a clear November morning, the townspeople watched a sleek silver jet cut across the sky and land on a private strip built just south of Jacobson Farm. On its side, freshly painted in bold, proud letters, "Jacobson Air Freight, Black-owned, farm-built, skybound." Epilogue: 3 months later, the White Hollow lawsuit gained national attention. A congressional hearing was scheduled. Jeremiah testified, not as a victim, but as a representative of every farmer who'd ever been told they didn't belong. Malia was offered a partnership at a major civil rights law firm. She turned it down, started her own instead. Red published a memoir, The Quiet Land War. Eldon passed away quietly, but not before telling Jeremiah, "You did it, son. You cracked the wall." And Jeremiah, he kept farming, but now he flew, too. A soul-hitting lesson on a bright spring morning. Jeremiah walked to the edge of his property and knelt by an old wooden post his grandfather once hammered into the ground. He placed a small metal plaque at its base. It read, "They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds." He stood, brushed the dirt from his jeans, and looked out over the land. It was still scarred, still healing, but it was free, and so was he. The end.